Hello, welcome to Metal Effort. My name's Nehemiah, and today we're looking at this piece of metal, the Spyderco Shaman. This particular one is a sprint run from bladehq. It's CPM M4. I'm not going to focus too much on the metal because you're probably not going to be able to get this knife again. It's sold out. Let's do some size comparisons. I think this one will be pretty interesting, and I'm going to tell you up front, I'm going to do a review of the Shaman, but I'm also going to do a comparison video comparing these three knives. You've got the Manix2, the Shaman, and the PM2. And we're going to have a free-for-all head-to-head and see which knife is the king of the big burly Spyderco knives. Basically, I'm going to refrain from giving you too much of a conclusion because that's going to be its own video. While we're at it, though, let's compare it to a couple other classic knives here. We've got our Spyderco kind of parade going through the town. We've got the Para 3, we've got the new Spyderco Drunken, and just a side note on this, I put a mirror edge on it, and it's been kind of breaking in really nicely, actually. I did bend the clip on this, so it's a lot more reasonable, a little bit more clearance over here, not so pokey up here, and just kind of a little bit of an update on the Drunken making a cameo here. And just for funsies, we'll take a look at the CKF Suhoi and the bladehq malware. These are some of my favorite knives here. I just got this back from Nick Shabazz. This one I reviewed, and man, this one I really like. Oh man, this is a good knife. But if you haven't seen any of the reviews on these knives, go ahead and check them out. I think I got a review on everything that I've shown you so far, except for this. Let's get some vital signs here. Clocking in well over 5 ounces, let's say 2.5 ounces. It's a beefcake for sure. Just to compare that real quick to these guys, you've got the Manix2 coming in at just over 4. You've got the PM2 coming in at 3.8. So the Shaman is kind of going in the opposite direction of where Spyderco has been going lately. Doesn't mean it's a bad thing to have a big burly knife. Lengthwise, we're coming in at 3.5-ish. Cutting edge is just over 3. I would say 3.1, 3.125 maybe. That's a big finger choil, which we'll talk about. All right, with the objective stuff out of the way, let's get into our dent, the decent, the excellent, the nitpicks, and the terrible of this piece of metal. First off, in the decent is this blade shape. This is a classic Spyderco Leap blade shape, and it's really just a good practical blade shape. You've got flats, you've got belly, you've got tip, and covers pretty much all your bases. You got piercing cuts for the clamshell. You've got enough flats to where you could do some slicing in the kitchen if you had to. It's just a really, really practical blade shape, and I appreciate that. Now, similar to the PM2 and the Para 3, you have the bottom finger choil, which is very, very similar to what you have on these guys, but there is a little bit of a difference. As far as how well it works pretty good. Jimping is very sharp on these Spydercos, which I'm not saying that as a bad thing. I think it's good. If you're going to put jimping, you better make it actually, grab on. And it definitely does on the choil. No jimping on the G10 here. On the top jimping, it's, more of a straight line. Not straight, but a smoother sweeping line than the, what I call reverse choil on the PM2 and the Para 3. Where it, because of that hump, it's kind of an odd angle. Most knives don't have that much of a upward slope there, and the Shaman here is very much kind of more in the line of like a native 5, kind of a straight back there, which is definitely a departure from the Para military 2 and the Para 3. The high grind makes it a decent cutter. This is definitely very thick blade stock. Just in case you're wondering, I guess we can do this. It is 0.145. And you'll notice here it's pretty thick all the way down. I mean, halfway down the knife, we're still at pretty much the exact same thing. So this is definitely a beefy blade. on the spine of it, where you notice on the PM2, you're sloping pretty quick in terms of thickness. This is probably the biggest departure in, you know, the geometry of the blade from the PM2. It's a very high grind. It's not a full flat grind like these guys, but it is a very, you know, high blade overall. So I would say the height of the grind on the PM2 pretty much starts where the high grind on the Shaman starts. So as long as you have enough time to get down to the edge, then you're usually able to get a pretty good, you know, thickness behind the edge. I still don't think this is the sliciest knife. You know, doing paper cuts, you know, it cuts fine, but just kind of the material and the thickness that you have up here, it's not going to make the best cuts. You know, cutting into cheese or something, it gets toward the end of it kind of like you need to baton it down. It's not really what this knife is meant for, so I'm not going to knock it too much. I think for really large, big, beefy blades, I think it does better than most of those knives. You know, thinking of something like a Hinderer Full Track or something along those lines, I think this is still more elegant and, you know, has some finesse compared to the really big burly stuff. But don't think that you're going to get a Spidey Chef slicing blade here. Oh, while we're on the topic of the blade, this is a aftermarket edge that I put on here. It definitely doesn't come mirror edge like this. That's something I did after the fact. I did cut quite a lot before I put on that edge just to get a feel for how sharp it was out of the box. It's pretty sharp. No complaints really, except for one I'll mention later. Another thing I really enjoy about this knife is the G10 on here. Now, I don't know. This is natural G10. I dyed this. Obviously, I don't think they would come like this. I just, you know, I like it to match. I'm a weirdo. But anyway, so this is like the kind of green, see-through-ish, not completely translucent or opaque thing that bladehq has going on with their M4 and their natural G10. So I don't know if the feel of this is different or the same as like the normal black G10, but it's definitely a lot smoother than the PM2's, you know, rougher finish. There is a smooth scale that you can get for the PM2. I think like the Crewwear exclusive from like Knifeworks, I want to say. I think that's smooth G10. It's like that, but it's got more grip than that, somewhere in between the smooth G10 on the PM2 and the normal kind of textured one that you have here. This is very comfortable to the touch. I wouldn't call it smooth or slippery in the slightest. I think this is probably the perfect kind of finish that you have on G10 of any that I've ever experienced. It's incredibly comfortable, both on the top. Next thing I really like about the handles is that it's very contoured. So you see, you know, the rounding that you have going on the edges, where you have your PM2s and Para 3s that are very kind of blocky in the hand. They're very ergonomic. You know, they're surprisingly so compared to just, you know, knives that are designed to look cool. But I think taking the extra time to round off and kind of contour the handles does take it that next step in the ergonomics for me. I would say this is more like a 9.5, 9.6 in terms of out of 10 in terms of ergonomics. And that was the thing I was most pleasantly surprised by. I thought this was going to feel just like the PM2, but it's much better. Another thing I like to point out that I didn't really like realize until I got the knife, there's a little backspacer here. So instead of like the flow through design lanyard loop type thing that you have on these guys, I actually really like this. It's not flush with the scales. I think that would be really hard for them to make sure those are perfectly flush. So just kind of owning it and having it go in on a deeper kind of inset placement is fine. It gives it a little bit of a, you know, finished look, a little bit more class with that little just steel backspacer. Nothing crazy. It does add a little bit of weight to the knife, obviously, and we see that in the weight, but I like how it looks, and obviously it's going to make the knife pretty sturdy when you've got it like that. Another thing I like is the blade to body ratio. So when the knife is closed, let's see if we can zoom, focus, there you go. The distance between the tip of the knife and the top or the back of the knife is very, very, very good. Comparing that to the Para 3, it's kind of a joke. It's like 4 times the distance. You know, if you measure the distance between the tip and the back, this is at least 4 or 5 times that distance. Same thing with the PM2. It's just there's a lot of wasted handle space, and because of that, the knives actually are shorter. You know, if you measure end to end from the top of the knife, you know, this is, can you see that? Oh, there you go. Compared to this guy. So I like that. You just a better blade to body ratio. At least counting all the way to the shoulder. You know, the actual cutting edge is not that much more, but the end of the knife comes a little bit in. There's some steel liners under here, so this is an extremely sturdy knife. You can see inside there's definitely some, you know, holes, speed holes, to kind of mill out the weight of it. You got 3 on this side and a bunch of little ones on the other side. I think, you know, if they didn't do that, this would be like a 7-ounce big beefy knife. But I like that, you know, steel liners do make it very, very durable on top of the G10 to just kind of make it a beater. Fit and finish on this is actually really, really, really good. The Detent, we'll talk more about the actual action of it, but it's really good. You know, I've gotten burned a few times on some Spydercos, so I'm a little bit skittish about, you know, what kind of, you know, action I'm going to get, but the actual fit and finish on this is quite good. It's centered. There's all the parts that need to be chamfered are chamfered. No glaring, you know, errors or mistakes or oddities on the knife. Everything came out of the box pretty much perfect, and so that's not something you always see in these production knives. But you know, when it turns out good, I definitely want to shout it out because it's hard to maintain, you know, that level of scrutiny on the knives. The one exception on the fit and finish is on, you know, the grind, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Let's move on to the excellent things. I've got 3 excellent things to kind of talk about here. The Spider Flick is making a strong, you know, showing here. This Detent is perfect for the Spidey Flick. It's strong, it's loud, it's reliable. Something that I really enjoy about Spydercos. I think that's why I end up owning so many of them. Just that Spidey Flick is so quick, reliable, and satisfying. And the Shaman here is no exception to that roll. It's just very easy to open it out. Sebenza roll is just as satisfying. You're not getting hung up on the detent or anything like that. Being a compression lock kind of avoids that problem. So however you want to open up a knife, you know, pretty much anything the PM2 can do, the Shaman can do as well. So we'll talk about the compression lock in the context of our OCD, our open, close, disengage in the wrong order. So I just kind of talked about the opening, and you know, detent is dialed in, and that's really, really nice. For disengaging, you have the, you know, classic compression lock here, and it's very similar to the PM2. It's a little bit wider, the tab, and you'll notice some jimping on the top of it, so it's a little bit easier to catch if you're just coming in at the top of it instead of having to come in from the side. That's pretty effective. I find it pretty easy to, you know, push that in. Thumb or finger, both are, you know, equal in how quick and easy it is to get in there, which is nice. You know, after the Kapara, this whole area was a disaster for the compression lock. I don't think that knife should have even been a compression lock. There just wasn't enough room to make sure you had access and room for all this. And I'm going to say, you know, similar things that everybody else is on the negatives of this, which you're kind of looking at right now. But in terms of actually using it to disengage the lock, this is great. I can, you know, just compress it enough to close it and it swings shut. I mean, it's fall shut action pretty much out of the box. I did lube it up and the action did get a little bit better. But man, I mean, this is perfect. It doesn't bounce out. It just, as soon as it closes, you're done. This is the biggest case for why compression locks are just awesome. They're easy to open, easy to close. And, you know, the actual drop part, the close part, again, you're seeing here is just fall shut. That's really, I want to give it like a 10 out of 10 on the open. And the close. Disengage is like a 9 out of 10. I'll talk about that one point that's going to be docked off here in a second. Last excellent thing I want to talk about is those ergonomics. Now, I talked about the scales and just the smoothness of them, but in terms of the actual geometry of the knife, I feel really connected to this knife when I'm using it. The clip happens to be out of the way. There are no hot spots really. I'm not saying that's going to be universal for somebody. If you happen to grip it in a way where that little, spoon isn't going in between your ring finger and middle finger like it is on mine, I can see how that could be a problem. But for me, it lands in the perfect spot and it's not an issue. So, that's one of the classic things about PM2s, Para 3s, is that they're so darn comfortable. I think this does just as good, if not better. I think the contouring of the scales just add to the overall comfort of the ergonomics enough to where I'm going to put this in the excellent. And I always, kind of shy away from doing this in the excellent because, ergonomics aren't going to be the same for everybody. But I think it's being a bigger knife than a smaller knife, it's easier for somebody with small hands to still be able to grip and have a comfortable knife as long as it's, no sharp edges or anything like that. So I'm gonna give it to this. I think this is one of the bigger draws as to why you would want to get this particular knife. If you need a big burly knife, this is gonna do the job. And if you're doing lots of cutting throughout the day, where long-term use could be an issue with ergonomics, I think this has you covered. So far, I haven't reviewed a knife that hasn't had some nitpicks, so we're gonna jump into those. The first thing is the little bump that I've alluded to. When the knife is closing on the compression lock, that little bump is gonna poke your finger off. I don't see how it can actively pinch you or harm you in any way. It's more of just kind of like an awkward little, oh yeah, I forgot about that. So if you're holding it down the whole time, it's not going to close. It's going to bump into your finger. You got to move it out of the way. If you do it enough, you're gonna learn to drop your finger off of that compression bar soon enough that it's not going to be an issue. Once you get that muscle memory, which I had, maybe half an hour after having it out of the box, it's just not an issue. It's not sharp. It's not cutting me when that happens anyway. If anything, it helps to stop the knife from bouncing, into the closed position. And if I still have the lock compressed, it might bounce back out. But this kind of hits my finger right before it closes, and then has enough tension on the detent that once I do move my finger, it still snaps into place. So I'm still giving it a 9 out of 10, but I do recognize the issue that people have with that. If you sanded that down or something, if you wanted to, I guess it'd be less of a problem if you're really bothered by it. I just don't think it is that much of a deal. Similar nitpick I have on all these is there's no sharpening choil, so you're gonna get a little bit of a smile. Let's see if you can see. Right now it's pretty good, but let's say I sharpen it 2 or 3 more times, that is gonna be more of a kind of an awkward little cliff right there. Not a big deal. Again, the knife is going to be so inefficient with its blade to body ratio of actual cutting edge if you did finger choil plus a sharpening choil. So this is kind of something that comes with the territory. It is what it is. This nitpick I haven't really heard anybody talk about, but I think it definitely is a nitpick on this knife. The sharpening, or the finger choil rather, is just way bigger than it needs to be. I think when you look at it, I was kind of like, oh man, there's so much wasted space, between cutting edge and the shoulder of the knife. There's just such a big chunk there. When you compare it to the PM2, it seems like another third extra space between the shoulder and the cutting edge. And I was like, why is it like that? And it's because the choil is just way bigger than it needs to be. You look at the finger choil on this, and again, it's like a quarter bigger than the PM2, which gives you plenty of space. I think even with gloves, this is enough space. And so I feel like that's just kind of shortchanging us on cutting edge. If you just bring this whole thing back a little and maybe down a little, then you can kind of solve 2 problems in one fell swoop. Of this bump would be, in a little bit and maybe lowered a little bit, and give us a little bit more of the actual cutting edge, and let the G10 be the majority of your finger choil instead of it being precisely 50-50 scale, and blade, you could just rein it in a little bit. And I still think you would have control of the blade just fine. Relying on, this part is still going to give you control through the pivot. So I think that's something I would want to see on like a Shaman 2 in the far future, is just scrunch this up a bit, and I think you got yourself a really good blade to body ratio and blade to finger choil ratio that I would be a lot more pleased by. Another nitpick is the freaking lanyard hole. It's like, it looks kind of like my gun gun shot the knife, and it's just, there's a giant hole here, which is kind of a weird spot for it. The clip is incorporated into the lanyard hole. This really, really, really frustrates me because it's such a shallow clip. Normally I could just throw on like a deep carry Spyderco clip and it's just not going to be the same. If I, look specifically for a Shaman one, I wasn't really finding one really right away. Hopefully if somebody can comment in the comments below if you know where to find a Shaman specific clip, I'll be all over that. But even if you do have a, the correct geometry for this little triangle screw thing, and the clip comes up way up here, it's going to block the lanyard hole anyway. And so this is another case of just favoring the lanyard hole over a good clip, and that's really frustrating. This is like every single Spyderco that I've reviewed has had a garbage clip, and this is no exception. I keep giving them money, and I everything else about the knife is awesome, but this clip, frustrating. Last nitpick is the steel. Now, I waited a very long time to buy the Shaman, up until this exclusive sprint run came out. CPM S30V was the only steel. And I think for such a big burly knife that steel is just a little underwhelming. You want something with a little bit more toughness, I feel like, for more like hard use, out on the farm, or, really heavy duty beatery type things that you need to do with the knife. I think crew wears, M4. I'd even be interested in like a 3V version of the knife. I think that would be kind of novel. But it's going to be hard to get this. This knife sold out in 3 minutes on bladehq. I was queuing. I just didn't get it. I was refreshing, waiting. Didn't get it. I ended up picking this up off the second market, and apparently I should consider myself lucky. I posted it, and within like 30 seconds, I happened to just be online at that time on Knife Swap on Reddit, and I snagged it up. I ended up paying like $20, $30 more than the retail price, which again, I'm annoyed by, but other people would gladly pay that much more for this knife because you're just not going to be able to get it. I've already ranted about sprint runs. If you want to watch any of my other reviews on any of the Spydercos, I go really in depth on the issue and what other possible solutions are. I'm not going to do it again here. But basically, if you're hoping to get a particular steel type, you got to pray to the knife gods and just hope that chance is going to present itself to you when they finally do come out with a crew wear version, or hopefully other sprint run versions. And you just got to get lucky. Next nitpick is the grind. The grind on this knife is just not even. On this side, it was basically perfect. No issues. They got to the end of the knife and it wasn't awkward or weird. On this side of the knife, you can see a couple issues that I didn't spend the time to rectify. This grind is not perfectly even. You can kind of see it right there. You might have to switch to your 4K if you're not. Also on the tip, right there, it's not quite even. You can see where it's not polished. I think it's the machines doing the grind, and just the start and the stop on this side didn't quite get done correctly. I don't know if that's an oddball, 1 out of 100 type situation, or if everybody has problems like this. I've been having problems on pretty much all my Spydercos with that issue. I don't know. I mean, do it better. This isn't made in Taichung. It's Golden, Colorado, and I think that kind of thing is the difference between Taichung's like level of attention to detail in Golden, Colorado. That's the kind of thing that I don't think would have flown in that plant. So whatever, not a big deal. I could spend more time on that. and fix it, but I'm removing a lot of material just for, you know, the polished edges. The actual edge of the knife is perfectly fine for cutting. It's just the beauty factor of it being even that I'm kind of missing out on. Not a big deal. Last thing, we'll go into the terrible. I don't have anything terrible really about the knife. I mean, you could make the case for the sprint runs being terrible, depending on how passionate you are about that problem. For me, I'm not promoting it to terrible quite yet. It's annoying. It's definitely annoying. Now let's talk about the conclusion. I'm going to be pretty brief on the conclusion again, just like the in-depth of like choosing a knife. If you only have room for one beefy Spyderco knife and you're curious which one do I like the most, I'll be annoying and save that for the comparison video. But I can easily tell you I do recommend the knife. If you're thinking about getting the Shaman for whatever reason, I say go ahead and do it if you can get one. If you're okay with S30V, go ahead and buy one right now. Those are readily available. If you want a nicer steel and you want a Shaman, then you're going to be pretty frustrated. So, you know, hang tight. Hopefully more steel types come out, more sprint runs come out, and you can get your hands on it. I unfortunately have to say it's probably worth the wait. I waited on this, and was pleasantly surprised at how it actually held up to my expectations and exceeded a little bit, even though I still am very aware of the issues. That's it, everybody. I hope this was helpful to you. I'll catch you in the next video. Keep on the lookout for that. Comparison video should go up pretty soon, within a week, I would say, of this one. Bye! Let's get some vital signs here. Oops, knocked our Funky's thing.